According to futurist Gerald Celente, founder of the TrendsResearchInstitute, the next world war has already begun. The civil war in Syria, the low-grade but escalating confrontation with Iran, and the percolating violence throughout the Near East aren't isolated problems, Celente insists, but the first act of what he says will be a global conflict. At the same time, both the United States and the European Union are sinking into a morass of debt and facing an unprecedented economic catastrophe. China, along with the world's factory floor, is dealing with its own severe economic contraction and the deeply entrenched corruption that has been concealed by a veneer of artificial affluence. In the United States, Celente sees two interrelated and very dangerous trends. The first is an increase in apparently irrational violence on the part of an increasingly desperate citizenry. The second is a radical expansion of the domestic police state and an associated increase in the violence and military of law enforcement. Unabashed lawlessness is becoming the norm for people in positions of public trust, Celente observes. This is true of politicians, judges, media personalities, and bankers. International bankers, beginning with the Federal Reserve, have been rigging the game, Celente points out, and they are continuing to siphon away wealth through money printing and unabashed fraud. For decades, Mr. Celente has been regarded as one of the world's most perceptive and prescient trends analysts. What does he have to say about what lies ahead for 2013? Welcome to the show, Gerald Celente. Let's jump right into this. How much difference, if any, will it make if Mitt Romney defeats Barack Obama?
The same difference it would make if the Bananos or Gambinos were in charge. No difference at all. When you look at their policies, there's really not much difference between them. Look at this whole presidential reality show. What are the differences? Let's talk about foreign policy. We gotta get Assad, they both babble out. Two little boys, chicken hawks, who never fought a day in their lives, talking tough about more military spending and the greatest military on earth. Not a bit of difference. Look at the national policy. There's not a lot. Where they talk about tax cuts and this and that, but on a grander scale, it's still more of the same, different face, same team, both incompetents, both members of the two-party corrupt system. Why should there won't be any difference? There's just a matter of details in who destroys the nation the fastest.
Now, many of Romney's supporters insist that Obama has been a weak, appeasement-minded president. Is that a fair assessment?
And who are Romney's supporters? I mean, he's a bunch of kids, babbling off. Look at Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. Hey, watch out, there goes another Predator drone knocking out a funeral in Pakistan. Whoa! Just got a couple of kids picking up some firewood in Yemen. Well, there goes another one blowing out a wedding party in Afghanistan. Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. I'll tell you, we got to take out that Gaddafi. Yeah, his time is up. Let's launch a humanitarian mission. Yeah, that's it. We'll destroy the whole damn country, kill tens of thousands of people, rack it into an unsolvable civil war, destabilize North Africa. Hey, Romney's going to trump that one? What? These are psychopaths. Everything they do is about war and destruction. Has anybody... go back, Gary. Go to the last debate. What a joke. But anyway...
Well, let's talk about that. In the third presidential debate, Romney surprised many people by appearing to favor a less aggressive military posture towards the rest of the world. Has he become a convert to non-interventionism, or is that just a facade?
It's a lot of crap. Listen to what he said about Iran. Iran can't get a nuclear weapon. They try to outdo each other between Obama and Romney. Listen to Romney talking tough about, we got to take out Assad over there in Syria. His days are numbered. I get a kick out of these little boys, these little chicken hawks who never fought a day in their lives, that are so willing to get American soldiers killed to because they got some psycho trip playing in their head. Let me tell you about Mittens Romney. That cat's about my age. I remember the Vietnam War days. Romney hid in France for 2 years, playing missionary Mitt. That's right, a Mormon missionary in all Catholic, cigarette-smoking, caffeine-addicted, wine-drinking, Brigitte Bardot-loving France. Yeah, beating the draft. No wonder why they punched him out over there. Nah, he's just a lot of hot air like Obama. This is all campaign crap spewing out of their mouths. Here's what they do, Gary. Go play over the tape. They ask him a question, and then what they do is they repeat the question during the debates, the so-called debates, and then they go into their campaign spiel that we've been hearing now for over a year. No, he's not. Look what he says about building military. Oh, you know, we're building 2 nuclear submarines a year. Romney wants to build 3. Oh, yeah, keep building, keep wasting. Look what's going on with the floods taking out the subway system in New York. You been in the trains and the subways in New York and the rest of the country? We're third world. Anybody that's traveled around. What a surprise. The entire infrastructure is dilapidated, and these clowns talking about waging more wars. Again, in all of the debate performances, who has come out and said, what brilliant men, what wonderful minds, what visionaries, what clear thinkers. They're little boys. I'll tell you something that everyone should put in their brain. Listen to Dwight D. Eisenhower, 5-star general, supreme commander of the Allied forces during World War II. No wars started under him. Matter of fact, before he became president, he was putting out the Korean War that was started by the psychopaths. And the reason he didn't start any wars is because he knows how ugly and violent and destructive they are. Listen to what he said. Any man that seeks the presidency is either crazy or an egomaniac. You got it. A stuffed shirt and an empty suit. Obama and Romney. The cats have never stopped running. When does Obama work? When does this guy ever do the job
let's talk about Barack Obama.
to do? He's always rolling up his sleeves on the campaign trail. And the same with Romney. This guy's been running all his life.
Now let's talk about Barack Obama. If he in fact does win a second term, what direction do you expect him to take regarding foreign policy?
More destruction, more intervention, more wars. By their deeds you shall know them. This guy destroyed Libya. Who was Libya bothering? I'll tell you why they were there. Because they have a precious broccoli crop? How about they're sitting on some of the most precious sweet crude in the world? The same reason that other war criminal George W. Bush started a war in Iraq. You remember those weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda? Couldn't be because Iraq is sitting on the second largest oil reserve in the world, could it? No, these guys are nothing more than pawns for the bankers and the military-industrial complex and the other interests that they bow down to, suck up to, and whose money they take to spend $2.5 billion to give us a BS campaign of nothing more than empty slogans and broken promises. How can any American feel proud that these are the 2 men that we will have to choose from? You know, a lesser of 2 evils. Big deal. Nothing good comes from evil, lesser or greater.
Now, I want to get into the economy in just a moment, but under a second term of Obama, what would you suppose a domestic agenda would look like? We do know now that they've authorized drone surveillance over the United States, the same drones that are bombing Pakistan, weaponized perhaps surveillance cameras. what do you suppose that his domestic agenda would look like?
Well, this is a guy that signed the National Defense Authorization Act on New Year's Eve that allows the military to take a guy like me, who I have relationships with. If you were in Bahrain, we'll get an email from someone in Bahrain that says that they have an internet site and they want to interview me. And all of a sudden I'm talking to this guy and they call him a terrorist. They could take me away for having contact with a terrorist. Never hear from me again. No charges, no judge, no jury, no trial, no writs of habeas corpus, no nothing. Jack, you're dead. That's what Obama signed, and it gets worse. How about the wonderful strip searching? Spread those legs, bend over, everybody. That's right, the Supreme Court ruled that if you get arrested and been put in jail, you could have one drink too many, and they put you in jail, you're subjected to strip search. Who was a friend of the court on that one? Couldn't have been the Obama administration, the same friend of the court that's arguing as we speak for warrantless wiretapping, the same Obama that took the Patriot Act that he said he would dismantle and upped it by several points. What do you think is going to go on?
Well, now let's be clear, because Romney has those same, he's advocating for those same exact policies.
And that's what I said at the beginning. It's a Gambino of a Bonanno. It's the crime families, but everybody wants to call them Democrats and Republicans. You know what the religion in America has become? Politics. That's right. People are caught in their belief system. This is the new religion of America. They are identical. There's only, who's going to go to heaven first and who's going to go to hell the quickest. It's all jive talk. They're exactly the same. Again, only the spelling and the punctuations are different.
Now let's talk about the economy. With regard to it, the most powerful figure is not the President of the United States, but the Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke. Now, he's apparently decided not to seek a third term in 2014. What should we make of that decision? Is he just skirting out before it all goes to hell, or is he just saying, it's time for me to retire?
I don't know. But I look at the guy and hear everything he said. He's been wrong on virtually every call he's ever made. Guy's been a university professor all his life. He's never worked a day in his life. So, I don't know his motives, but the fact is that there's a track record of failure. When I called the panic of '08 back in 2007 and said it would hit in '08, Bernanke said, oh no, there's no recession on the horizon. When I said that there was a real estate bubble, Bernanke said on CNBC, oh no, we've never had a situation where real estate prices nationally decline. When I said that the whole mortgage thing was going to unravel, Bernanke said, oh no, the subprime won't go into the major mortgage markets. When I said that all of these bailouts, the trillions of dollars spent, would do nothing other than enrich the rich and make the fat fatter on the financial top of the pyramid, everybody else was saying, oh no, this is what needs to be done to prevent the nation from going into depression. Why would anybody believe anything spewing out of Bernanke's loser's mouth? And people say, Gary, there's a new world order out there. There is. It's not an Illuminati, and it's not hiding behind any Bilderberg Gates or Bohemian Grove. It's right there in front of everybody. The new world order is the banking order. And it's not only in the States, it's over in Europe. It's all centralized power. You go to back in one of our summer trends journals. Matter of fact, I have it right here. This is the cover. Jesus beating the money changers out of the temple. But this time the money changers are a bit different. They got names on them: Goldman Sachs gang, the Merrill Lynch mob, the J.P. Morgan Chase criminals, Dexia, Bank of Scotland, on and on. Think about this. It's very important.
Well, let's talk about the impact of QE3.
Let me just finish this thought.
Let's talk about
you go back to biblical times. Why does Christ become violent and pick up a whip? Because the money changers are destroying the people. The Prince of Peace becomes violent. The money changers are destroying the globe. And the next thing they're going to do is take us into war.
Now let's talk about the impact of QE3, because the money changers, as it would be today, are printing money indefinitely to the tune of, what, $40 billion a month, and some have called it QE infinity. What's going to be the impact of that type of policy?
It's a debasement of the currency. It's going on in Europe as well. That's what I'm saying. They're bailing out banks. They have indefinite buying of useless bonds. So all they're doing in both countries is they're just printing more digital money, not worth the paper. Both sides of the Atlantic, I should say, is printing more of this digital money and debasing the currency.
You spoke about the other side of the Atlantic here. Now, the European Union, they were just awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, even as the whole European Union is suffering from an economic collapse, increasing social upheaval. Is it possible that we will see another war on the continent after more than just 6 decades of quote-unquote relative peace?
Yes, it's already happening. And again, who cares what the Nobel Peace Prize is? They gave one to Obama, and what does he do? He starts a war against Libya. You know, so, and as I said, predator drones and extrajudicial killings, it means nothing. Millions of people are taking to the streets in Spain. Millions throughout Europe, in Portugal, in Greece, in Italy. There's a war going on already. And again, this war is as old as history. It's a war between the classes, the haves and the have-nots. Go back to our TrendsJournal in 2010. It was Off with Their Heads 2.0. The rich are getting richer. Look in the United States. Look at the numbers coming out. The gap between the rich and the poor is the widest in the U.S. of any of the industrialized nations. The gap wealth in the United States, it's on the level of Uganda and Kyrgyzstan. So when you look at what's going on in Europe, it's more of what's going on in Romania. When you go to Eastern Europe, breakdowns in Romania, Bulgaria. You have contested elections in the Ukraine. The entire globe is being unsettled. There are now wars cropping up throughout North Africa. There's a war in Qatar going on now that's just bubbling up. Tens of thousands of people taking to the streets. Excuse me, Kuwait, not Qatar. You see what's going on in Yemen, what's going on in Bahrain, what's going on in Libya and Syria. Again, tens of thousands of people taking to the streets in Jordan. The judges going, protesting in Morocco. So it's one after another. The financial systems are collapsing, and when all else fails, they take you to war.
Now, Gerald, let me ask you this question, because you mentioned all these other nations and of uprisings taking place, but yet in America, there seems to be an element of complacency. Now, we do see Occupy movements or Tea Party movements, but we don't see the level of uprising in the United States as we do in these other nations. Now, being a trends forecaster, is that going to, at some point, take place here? Are we going to see people overturning police cars and burning storefronts and rioting, just like we're seeing in these other nations? Or are people just going to be sitting on their couches and complacently watching television as the world burns around them?
You can't get out of line in the United States. They knock you down right away. Look what they do. Look how they beat up the Occupy people. Look what they did when they had the G20 meeting in Chicago. They closed down the place. Same thing in Pittsburgh. You can't get out of line in this country. And then look at the people in this country. We're the most obese nation on earth. We take more prescription drugs than anybody. We're sedated. we're genetically modified in our food intake. America's lost its drive. There's no individuality anymore in the sense of a grand scope. And Americans have lost their courage. You look at this election. Again, people are fighting over which lesser of two evils they're going to vote for, rather than demanding the greater of two goods. So it's on every level, Americans are falling down. And I don't anticipate any great riots in this country. You'll see it manifest itself in a different way. More crime. You've already seen it. Violent crime has increased. It's not making the news. Can't make the news. We've got to talk about the hurricane. Oh, I love those pictures, you know, the people blowing in the wind. 18%. Violent crime is up 18%. You know my saying, when people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. So you're going to see it more on individual levels rather than a national level at this time.
That's an interesting perspective. Now, let's talk about Russia and China. They have assembled an international coalition with Brazil and India called the BRIC. How significant is that economic bloc, and can it survive the ongoing economic turmoil?
That's a very good question, Gary. You know, the BRIC nations are very strong as long as Europeans and American consumers are buying. You combine the two of them, we're talking what? 650 million people. All of a sudden, 650 million people, your prime consumers in the world, stop buying goods. Brazil isn't exporting raw materials. China is not making much of anything. Same with India. And Russia's not exporting their raw materials and gas and oil. So you have a slowdown that's going to affect them as well. So, but at some point, we do see an amalgamation of a currency to challenge the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Because as you mentioned earlier, when you talk about Bernanke with QE infinity, they're debasing the currency. The more you print, the less value it has. The same thing with the euro. So we envision something in the future where the BRICS come up with maybe their currency, a reserve currency, the United States and Europe, in other words, all of the groups getting together to come up with a new reserve currency. And we believe it's going to have a foundation of some sort based on gold and even possibly silver, but a precious metal supporting it at some level, because the BRICS can't go out on their own. They need consumers in order for them to make money. You look what's going on in India. India's unraveling
If I could just interrupt you for a moment, because I want to jump back. You mentioned this perhaps a new currency backed by silver and gold. If that does in fact happen, aren't we going to see even more of a skyrocketing of the value and the price of gold?
Will there be a skyrocketing in the price of gold? Yes. They'll probably peg gold at around $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 an ounce. When you just attribute for inflation now, compared to when gold hit its high intraday trading level at $875 an ounce back in 1980, you're looking at gold should be worth now about $2,300. So they're going to repeg the price of gold much higher in order to have it as a support system holding up the currencies. Also, very important, who's holding the gold? Where is the gold? We know that we don't know where the gold is in Fort Knox. They won't let anybody look. Isn't that wonderful? America, America, the land of freedom, when we want to give it to you. Why can't we, the people, know what's in there? Why can't they show us? Oh, no, can't show you. Go over to Germany. There's a big scandal going on now. They don't know where the Bundesbank has its gold. They're saying some of it's in France, some of it's in England. Oh, yeah, great. Wouldn't the Germans, isn't that wonderful, putting their gold in their great former World War II enemies' banks? Oh, and the United States. But can't show it to you. No, not going to show it to you. And even if they did show it to us, it's only 133 billion euros. That's smaller than the Greek bailout. And that's supporting the whole German economy. The point I'm making is that nobody knows where the gold is. They don't know how much gold is out there. And I believe gold is much more valuable and precious than it's being pegged at right now. As we're speaking, what is it around? A little over $1,700 an ounce. The reason I believe is that the central banks are driving down the price because, number one, they're not holding it, and number two, they keep printing all of this digital money not worth the paper it's not printed on and debasing their currency. So as gold prices go up and people realize, I don't want to hold that worthless paper, it's not good for business for the bankers. Now, would they drive down the price? Well, remember the LIBOR scandal? When they were rigging the interest rates? Hey, you don't hear about that one anymore, do you? They were rigging the entire world's interest rates, a handful of banks. You think they're fixing the price of gold? Of course they are. They're rigging the entire game. Whether it's MF Global stealing money out of segregated accounts like mine, or Peregrine doing the same thing, or rigging or high-frequency trading, the games are rigged.
Now, it was recently reported that 7 out of 9 Southeast Asian countries have pegged their currency to the Chinese yen rather than the dollar. How significant is this development regarding the dollar status as the world's reserve currencies we've been speaking about?
Again, we're going to see more and more pegs, either whether it's the Japanese yen, the Chinese yuan, the BRIC nations coming together. We're going to see a reconfiguration. Again, the dollar only became the reserve currency just near the end of World War II with the Bretton Woods Agreement. Take a look at the world after World War II. Europe's destroyed. Russia? You know, Russia's down on its back. China? Who cared about China? Now it's a global economy. The whole game has changed. The United States is only a superpower in mind only. We're $16 trillion in debt and growing. So yes, there's going to be a reserve currency. How it formulates, it's still too early to tell because it's a consolidation right now of power among the bankers. Once I believe the bankers grab more of that consolidation, once more of the nations in Europe lose their sovereignty and more power is put under the central banks out of Brussels to control that with a commissioner overseeing all of the budgets in Europe. Once the United States gets through this election process, I think then you're going to see more attention put toward a reserve currency.
Now, what happens when the U.S. goes over these much-discussed fiscal cliff next year?
Well, again, it devalues the dollar, and you see gold prices should go up. But again, they're rigging the game. Look, how can any adult think that the Republicans and Democrats are going to solve this problem? The only reason they postponed it till after the elections was because they couldn't fix it before. And now it gives them more stalling time to come up with more schemes undreamed of, trying to fix the unfixable. The one way to fix it, or the couple of ways to fix it, or they're not going to fix it. One is to cut the defense budget. What's the defense budget at? When you put in defense and defense-related expenditures, over $1 trillion. How about that wonderful Homeland Security, $80 billion? How about, you know, the loopholes and the tax breaks for the multinationals? And what are they talking about? They're calling rich people, both Obama and Romney, $250,000 a year. That's not rich. Not if you live in New York. You have a couple of kids. You're living okay, but you're working really hard to make it all happen. So they're not, and they're not going to put up trade barriers again that we had in place. They're not going to put in place the Glass-Steagall Act, which prevented the bankers from becoming the money changers that are raping us. So they're not going to do anything of any consequence.
Now, I'm going to give you the last word here. This is the last question, and I want to make sure people can locate you. They can go to your website, so be sure to give people the information on how to do that. You've made reference before to an economic martial law in which you say is already in place. How likely is it that we will see a literal martial law in this country, and what can people do to prepare for such a contingency?
You know, we just saw a hurricane hit in New York, Sandy. They closed down Wall Street for 2 days. Imagine if there's a terrorist strike. Remember the last time it happened on 9/11, Wall Street was closed for a week. What's going to prevent them from closing banks? Because the more America's foreign policy engages in other countries, the more likelihood of a terrorist strike in the U.S. False flag or real. What does it mean? It means that this is an excuse to close the banks down, devalue the currency, and make it illegal, for example, to trade in gold, as they did in 1933 with the Emergency Banking Act. What did they do? They forced people to sell their gold, made it illegal to hold it. They made you sell it to the banks or the government at what? $20, I believe, and 67 cents an ounce, or $22.67, something around that. And then when the banks reopened, they repegged gold at $35 an ounce. And in those days, the dollar was pegged to gold, which meant that, in effect, you lost 70% of your purchasing power. I believe they'll do that kind of a thing because they're not going to be able to solve these problems. They'll call a bank holiday, devalue the currency, and play the game all over again. But in the meantime, we're doing a replay of what happened back then. The crash of 1929, Great Depression, currency wars, trade wars, World War. The Panic of '08, the Great Depression, it's on now. There's a depression in Europe. You look at John Williams' shadow stats in the US, he's showing unemployment around 22%. People have temporary jobs, barely can make ends meet. They count those people as employed. And then you look at the currency wars, they're already heating up. Listening to Guido Montega, the finance chairman of Brazil. What is he saying? Currency wars begun. They're devaluing the currencies by lowering the interest rates to near zero so that exporters could export more of their product because the currency is not worth a lot of money. What does that bring you to? Trade wars. Listen on the campaign trail. Trade wars are already heating up between China and the U.S. Oh, I forgot. China going to war with Japan over islands. Look at the trade disputes going on between China and Japan does most of their trade with China. Now it's off about 10 to 18%. And what happens next? World wars. We've seen this play out before. It's playing out again.
How can people get a hold of you and subscribe to the Trends Journal?
Very simply, TrendsJournal.com, TrendsJournal.com, and I can say with all certainty that there's no publication like it in the world that's going to show you history before it happens. And in these days, we suggest you prepare and you prevail in order to survive. Because you could see what one little hurricane did in destabilizing so much of the Northeast. Imagine when things really start to unravel. You don't hear anybody making fun of those preppers now, do you? No, no. They're safe and secure. And by the way, there's a money-back guarantee, and we have a discount request form for all those that can't afford the full price, but it's only $99 a year. Having said that, we want to make sure everybody is positioned to weather the coming economic and geopolitical storm that's so clear in our sights.
That was Gerald Celente, the publisher of TrendsJournal.com. We'll be right back.